Hi, and welcome to another weekly episode of Creating Resilience. A big wave from Jonathan there. And today we are discussing a topic that welcome Gwenna, uh,
Hi.
topic that I absolutely love, embracing your light and your darkness. Now, this is not a topic that a lot of people like, but it's a topic that we all need, every single one of us. And the deeper we delve in, I think, what was that?
Ooh, that was beautiful.
It was like the heavens opened up and just gave us.
I agreed with you so much.
It's because I'm on today.
So I'd like to remind our audience that this show is about you as well. So we'd like to hear your voice if you ever like to be on, or if you simply would like to stay in the darkness and just type us your comments and your questions and participate that way. You're very welcome to do that as well, whatever suits your fancy. So without further ado, we will embrace the topic. And since Gwenna, you're the one who suggested this topic, then we're going to go all in with you starting off. So please go right ahead.
All right. Well, it's a big topic, so I don't even know which part I should start at. But one thing that I have learned to do over the past, I would say maybe 3 years or so.
Uh-oh.
So it looks like Gwen has frozen up a little bit. And might I ask everybody on the panel to do as Vanessa is now doing when you're not speaking, mic yourself, please. On to Gwenna back in. Just mic yourself when you're not speaking. But that means that you'll have to remember to unmic yourself when you are speaking. So I'm going to, Gwenna, can you hear me? Okay, she's going to come back in. So we're going to start then with, 1 second, please. We're going to start by simply reminding people that every single week at 12 noon on a Wednesday, we now have this virtual webinar, which is really has now become something more like a roundtable where we discuss many different topics of your heart's desires, yours too, ours too, everybody's. And so, Gwenna, welcome back and go right ahead, please.
All right. So I was saying over the past few years, I've really started to not fear the side that I call what we call dark. And what I'm meaning by that is I personally believe everyone has a polarity. I don't believe that everybody is all good. I believe that everybody has a dark side, especially if it is tapped into, or there's enough fear there, or there's an emergency response to something, or there's something that's triggered. It will come out. So I believe that we all have a polarity. And in this time right now of such civil unrest, I've really had to work on balancing both those sides. So, in the beginning, when all of this was happening with all of the civil unrest and the marches and the protests, and usually what I do is I kind of retreat inside and just say, oh, I'm just going to be spiritual and just focus on love and let them deal with all of that. I'll feel the pain just a little bit, and then I'll pull out, and then I will take that and maybe put it in something else. For me, what it used to be years ago was shoe shopping and traveling and food. And what I'm doing now is I'm learning how to embrace those feelings and feel the pain and feel the emotion. And what I'm learning is that when you confront it or just allow it to come through, it will pass. And sometimes those feelings are sadness, sometimes they are rage, sometimes it's madness, sometimes it's just pure frustration, and then sometimes it's just complete bewilderment, which I'm kind of dealing with that right now over some things. I'm kind of in a state of kind of just bewilderment. But I'm learning to balance it a little bit. And there's times where online I will, and this is a really mild form of it, but because we're not really dealing with each other in public, we're all pretty much dealing with life virtually. I will sometimes let myself, I'm not proud of it all, but I will sometimes unleash virtually. So if there's someone that I know or don't know or care about or don't care about says something that's extremely triggering, sometimes I'll let myself feel the emotion and express to that individual how I feel, and it doesn't always come out in a very kind way. And there's times where I'm like, well, maybe I should have been more gentle. And there's times where I'm like, you know what? I said what I said and I meant exactly that. But to even take it just a little bit deeper, I've always been a little bit fearful of my dark side because I was afraid that I didn't know how to manage it and that it may get out of control or that I may go too far. I grew up with a mom that was very unapologetic and spoke her mind and never held stuff in. And as healthy as that sounds, sometimes it looks very scary. And so I never wanted to be like that. I always wanted to be the friendly person and approachable. So I've always kind of suppressed my desire to kind of rage and unleash, but I'm learning that there's a healthy way that you can still do it. And like I said, when you allow yourself to express some of that dark energy and some of that pain, it actually subsides and you can move on. It always feels like I'm in a video game when this happens. It's like once I allow myself to do it, I feel like I go up another level. So yeah.
So Gwenna, you were talking about your mother expressing herself always. We're meant to express ourselves. That's actually very healthy, but it's the way in which we do it that we need to look at and see why we choose a certain way other than the many other ways. Because you were talking about the polarity before. I'm so glad you brought up polarity. And I don't see the polarity as being between any two. It can be a mirrored different ways, the polarity, not just two facets of it. So by expressing ourselves, which is what you were doing online, you were saying that you didn't like the way you expressed yourself. And to a child, your mother might have seemed extremely frightening. And because she didn't know a different way of expressing herself. So it's not, I think about self-expression as more about understanding why we feel a certain way, what it is that we're feeling, and how to deal with it. Not to control it, but how to deal with it. Is there anybody?
And to me, I just want to say she wasn't frightening to me because I knew, her love as well, but I could see in others' eyes that she was frightening. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thanks. Thank you. Anyone else wants to follow up on this? Just put your hand up and I'll come to you and then you can unmic yourself. Jonathan, I'm putting you up. You can unmic. Thanks.
Yes, yeah, actually, I think that's amazing to expressing yourself, and I think what you do is really amazing because people always respect people that express themselves. Because when you think about it, the only people who will express yourself with you when you do something wrong is your friends. People who doesn't care about you, they will just say okay, and they will go somewhere else. But your friends will tell you. Either you like it or not, they will tell you what they really think. And I think not many people have the courage to express themselves. And I think that's a proof of courage and that you are in line with your value. And I think that's very positive.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. So I'm going to go back to Gwenna. Gwenna, you asked for the topic to be embracing your light and your darkness. So when you're on the internet and you're expressing yourself, are you having issue with the duality of how do I express myself? Is that what you're saying? I'm not clear.
Not as much anymore. I used to because I suppressed myself a lot prior to, I would say, even this year. But what I'm finding in the ordinary or regular person is that they believe that if you're nice and you're a nice person, and that's kind of like your description that you're a nice person, the moment that you express the polarity and that you show anger, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe she did this. I thought she was a nice person. And people don't believe that you can be both, that you can be a nice person, you can be loving, and you can be about the light, and you can be about divinity, but yet you can also be extremely unapologetic in the anger and the rage that you express. Because often I see people using love and light to try to fix all the problems in the world. And yes, we do need those type of people, and we do need love and light to help balance all the darkness that's in the world. But I don't think it's a real characteristic of a human being living on this planet. I believe every last one of us has a polarity, and if you deny that polarity, it's gonna be made up in another way, like eating your feelings, or expressing it in so many other different ways that maybe no one else can visually see. So I just find that people have a hard time seeing the light and the darkness in a person and thinking that it's normal. Most people will see you express your rage and your anger, and then they don't believe that you're a nice person. They think that you were being fake the whole time, but that's really not the case. You're the embodiment of both. And I think too, as like, and I'm not going to act like I have the answer to this, because I totally do not. Like, I think it's an ever going journey. But you can sometimes, I've seen where anger can be the Kickstarter to getting to the light. And it's like, it's almost like, well, and I just keep going back to this because it's been the catalyst for me this year. When all the stuff happened with George Floyd, usually I'll watch it, I'll cry, I'll feel the pain, and then I shut it down. It's done. I'm like, nope, I'm not going to stay in that. I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to rage with everybody. I got a life to live. I don't have time to be sad. But this time I made a different choice. I said, I don't want to shut it down this time. I want to feel with everybody else. I want to go through what everybody else is going through. I want to go on this journey to help create change. And I don't know how you can help create change if you're constantly shutting it down, not looking at it, not paying attention to it, and not feeling it, because it's the feelings that create, to me, in my experience, that expand the empathy, that allow you to understand this is what they've been going through the whole time, or this is what this is not for the weak. If you're going to go through this journey and allow yourself to feel, this is hard. This is not easy. To me, it's easy to shut it off and to kind of turn a blind eye to pretend like it's not there. But if you decide you're going to walk through this, you're going to feel all the emotion. There's times where I read an article and I can't stop crying. There's times where I'll watch something and I'm like, okay, it gives me hope. It makes me just love the world even more. So it's like I said, I don't have the answers. I'm just expressing like what I've learned so far on this journey that I'm kind of new on, in a sense.
So maybe what we really need to do is redefine what loving means. So maybe loving is doing the work of Debbie Ford and all the others who have so invested themselves in the shadow work. I remember when I was studying to be a Chopra Center educator with Deepak Chopra, Dr. David Simon, and Roger Gabriel, we studied the work, the shadow work, and I loved it, which is why I got so excited when you said you wanted to discuss this topic, because maybe loving means realizing that we are all of it. We are bits and pieces of everything, and the parts of ourselves that we reject will always haunt us and follow us in ways that make us angry and resentful. And when we take it to the nth degree, it actually shows up as murder and rape.
Yes.
Because we haven't accepted that part of ourselves. I remember reading the work and loving it of Thomas Merton. And I've gotten into a lot of trouble for saying this. I've not said it online for a long time. But when I read Thomas Merton, I was absolutely astonished at his definition. And it's something that has always bothered me, that I didn't understand when I came to the United States. When people use the word spirituality, it seemed to me they meant religious,
Mm-hmm.
and that they confused both. And then Thomas Merton, in his book, was talking about the fact that every single human being is spiritual. We are simple spiritual beings living in a very, manifesting ourselves in a very dense dimension, in a very material dimension. So everything and anything we do is spiritual. There's nothing we cannot do that is not spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
So to say that one person is spiritual or you're not behaving a spiritual way is kind of shocking, because we all came to this dimension in order to really explore all of ourselves and to explore the physical dimension, which means we need to be okay with all the parts of ourselves we do not like. Because when we do that, we embrace the truth and the true beauty of who we are and the full energy of our power. When we do not do that, it takes a hold of us and it shows up as violence.
Yes.
So I'm really glad we're having this conversation today. For those who have not heard of the work of Debbie Ford, I'm strongly suggesting each person start studying Debbie Ford, and you can study with her if you so have that opportunity. And the work of Thomas Merton. I remember being accused online when people found out I was studying with Deepak Chopra, and they said, but he's the biggest hypocrite. And I was just shocked. This is, of course, online. And I said, you don't even know him. I have spent over 2 years now with him, studying him. You have no idea who he's. Why are you saying that? Oh, because he drives, I don't remember what it was, a BMW or a Mercedes or something. I don't remember. Some car, a car. A material piece of tin that just has wheels on it. And I said, he said, oh, he pretends to be so spiritual, yet he's driving all these luxury cars. I said, he doesn't pretend to be spiritual. He is just like you are right now with what you're saying. Boy,
Yes.
did I come under attack for that.
I believe it.
My response was to ask them to please read Debbie Ford and do some work with her until they can make themselves and be loving to themselves. I told them the most loving thing you can do now is accept that people drive Mercedes-Benz, Bentleys. That's just a piece of tin that falls apart and rots. But our soul persists. And what about embracing the love within of yourself so that then you can embrace other people when their own lives, because the internal part of us manifests externally. If you love yourself the more, you might end up with a Bentley.
I heard that. I heard that.
It's important to have a Bentley, not because it means anything to have a Bentley, except that you know how to manifest. That's all. So anybody else? Vanessa, I know you had wanted to say something before. Please go ahead.
Oh, I want to say lots of things. My head is just spinning with everything you guys have said. Jen Brown says it's a heart. Thank you, Jen, for watching. Heart back to you. And I took some notes because there were so many good things that you guys were saying that I wanted to follow up on. The first that Dorit and Gwenna were really focusing on, and I as a psychotherapist, and my dark side likes to say emphasis on psycho in psychotherapist, is that when we don't express things, the body contains it all. So I may not express my anger towards you, but it sure as heck is going to come out somehow. Either I'm going to sabotage something, be passive aggressive, forget to do something that I said I do. It's going to come out in a twisted way because the body needs to express it. If I'm not owning it, that's when the problems happen. That's when the murder, the road rage, all these things are happening because of that tension that builds up inside you that needs to express this anger. And it's going to come out one way or another. So the more that we own it, own our biases. When I was in graduate school, we had to work on our biases, our prejudices. We didn't pretend they weren't there. We really worked through them and we're aware of them, so that if I have a client who walks into my office, I'm not unintentionally acting out my bias or prejudice. I'm aware of it and I've worked on it so that I can choose my response. So it's a functional, healthy response that's under my choice rather than spewing out of me one way or another. And I think, Gwenna, when you were talking about your mother and how people were afraid of her, it could be because they haven't owned those parts of themselves. And so that's very frightening to see that level of power. And it could be also that if we're not fully aware of what's going on with us, it'll come across in a different sort of way from how we're intending. The other thing I was thinking is that when we have strong, healthy boundaries and won't just do whatever people want or aren't easygoing and just go with the flow, because we say, no, this is my boundary and I'm not going to do that. And we can say that with that loving spirituality that we all have, as Dorit pointed out, but it's a boundary, and you're saying, you may be saying no, that empowered no that you may be saying that people may not like, and they think, oh, she's not that nice because she won't just do whatever I want. So a lot of this is having those boundaries, which are part of a duality. And I was going to say that George and I have been watching this series called Dark. Interestingly enough, a German series about time traveling in different dimensions. And their whole point was actually that there's not just two worlds. There's not just two polarities, that there are three. And I would say, like Dorit said, infinite. There isn't just the light and the dark. There's so many others and so many other dimensions and possibilities. And that when we embrace whatever it is we're feeling without judging it, that's when we have those kind of richness of choices. And I remember when I was working in a probation facility, one of the kids was really afraid to turn 18 because he said that's when it's a lot harder to lock your records down, you know, or expunge them so that people in the future can't find what you've been charged with. So much harder after 18. And he was saying to me, I have all these impulses inside me and I'm afraid of them. And I said to him, it's not about not having the impulses. Like, I go into stores, I look around all the time, I'm thinking, I wonder how easy it would be to steal that. And what if I grabbed that and ran fast? Like, would they be able to catch me? Would I say, oh, I'm testing your security system? Like, what would I do? And I just think of, I'm constantly thinking of what people might define as criminal behavior. I'm curious about it. I read murder mysteries. Don't worry, I'm not planning on committing one. I just am curious about all these different things and what those experiences would feel like. And the actors part of me loved playing villains. That was like the most fun thing to play. So I said to this kid, because it was at the time of the whole Harry Potter thing, I said, it's like the sorting hat that you put on to determine which house you're going to get sent to in Harry Potter, knows your impulses. And it said to Harry, yes, you have those dark impulses, but the choices you make are what make you who you are, not what's inside you, not the impulses. And I said that to this kid, and he understood that because he wanted to make very different choices from what he had been doing earlier. So it wasn't about, I have to push down all these bad impulses. No, get closer. Like Gwenna said, get closer to them. They don't have power over you when you get in closer. So those were just a few of the thoughts. I'm just looking to see real quick if I have any other things. Oh, the last thing I was going to say is when people say, don't cry. One of my humongous pet peeves, don't cry. Okay, how about I stop breathing too? Would that be good for you? Crying is a good and healthy and natural expression of emotion. If I'm happy, I smile. If I or laugh, I may be crying. If I'm sad, I may even yell if I'm angry, hopefully just to myself. But these are all natural expressions of emotion. I think we should never stop the expression of the emotion. It's just the actions that we do that we need to be mindful of. So just wanted to say that. Paige Parsons Roach, thanks for watching. She says very engaging. Thank you, Paige. Can't wait to have you back on here as well.
Yes, George.
I'm going to step back a little bit. One of the things that I know Vanessa and Gwenna, we've talked about that just living in the light, and just to expand on that, one of the things that I've kind of observed, and I'm really more aware now that we've had these kind of conversations, is that it seems that there's a tendency for someone who lives in that way to not be in reality. And therefore, when something even more difficult comes that involves that real hard look and work through it, instead of distancing, it just becomes this larger, almost larger than life thing. It also seems to sometimes lead to advice, to unsolicited advice to others, where they're feeling that they're helpful, but unfortunately, it's just further disengaged from reality. Another point, something that, along with Vanessa talking about the show that we've been watching, and as well as something she mentioned right before we started here, and I think about as an activist, is the tendency to say, to use the word militant vegan. Well, I've really struggled with that term, because it just doesn't fit. It's illogical, almost like an oxymoron to me. And that, militant, I think of someone who is domineering, overpowering, violent, destructive, and it's quite the opposite for someone who is merely speaking up in a nonviolent manner for injustice. And my take on that is, how can one know and see and witness these things without speaking up? That to me would not be true to yourself and living in both the light and darkness. We accept that darkness is happening, as far as observing it happening and knowing that it's.
So I think we have just lost
Yeah,
George for
I
a
dropped
second.
off for a second, but I'm
Okay.
back. Yeah, but what I'm saying is that we stand up for it and accept that this is the fight, and I use that term loosely, not in a violent manner, that we have to take on. But to remain silent, or to just be sending out this positive love and hope, that's not what's going to change the world. The same as what Gwenna was talking about in the the racial injustice and violence. We can sit there and meditate and think about all these things, but we're not going to get anywhere without that action and that true whole acceptance of all those parts of us.
Jonathan, go ahead, please.
Yes, yeah, I totally agree. But also, there's different levels. There's some people that are not ready to express themselves, and I'm going to talk about what I know. It's mainly fashion, and I believe that you can express yourself with fashion just by wearing a shirt, like I'm doing right now with Animal Save, or any social injustice you want to fight against. You can have a Black Lives Matter, LGBT, or woman empowered, like whatever, but just by wearing a shirt that give a message that can put yourself in line with your value, you make a fashion statement, and by doing this, even spiritually, it will help you to be more successful in your activism. That's truly what I believe. I know that they did. I was thinking about this. They did a test. I don't know how to say, like a test. It was a rabbi, and they, you can take a picture now. I don't know how they do, but they take a picture of your aura. And there was this rabbi who took a picture before and after he prayed. And after he prayed, you could see that the aura was way bigger. And I believe it's the same with meditation or anything. And that's the proof that when you are in a state of mind of happiness and expressing yourself, it's actually help you to have a bigger aura, and so your spirituality is way bigger. So that's what you were saying, Dorit, and I think it's true. We all have spirituality, and everybody, I would love actually to do this test with a regular shirt and with a shirt that have a meaning for you, even if it doesn't say nothing, just a shirt from an ethical brand that you like, that it's 100% organic cotton or something like positive. And I'm sure we all experience that when you wear something that you like, you feel more successful and you're ready to go and go in life,
Is there anyone who wishes to come on and continue what Jonathan was saying? Go ahead, please, Vanessa.
I just ran down the hall to get my vegan power shirt because I do think, and it's all 100% organic cotton. I do think that every way that we can express ourselves has power. And I wanted to just link in what Jonathan was saying to the Deepak and the Bentley. is that I think that we do manifest better, and that we're drawing more opportunities to ourselves when we have a creative, open mindset. We see more solutions. I know that when I'm flustered and angry and stressed, I can't solve simple problems quickly. I'm doing things and over and it's not working. But when I'm in this relaxed, hopeful, and open thing, solutions come and the creativity flows much more. Yeah. And so we can manifest better. I don't want to manifest a Bentley because they're very uneco, but I would like to manifest a Lamborghini, for example. So I think that when we give ourselves all the tools and the power and express ourselves fully, that's when we're much more congruent. We accept all those different sides to ourselves. We accept that we may enjoy something here and not feel guilty about this tin car that will eventually rust, that we won't feel, we're not going to abuse ourselves if we want nice things, or if we occasionally get angry, or like Gwenna said, she at first was like, oh, maybe I should have said that more nicely, or but that was actually how I felt and what I meant. And that we're loving and forgiving and accepting with ourselves. When we make a mistake, we hit the reset button, we own it, we apologize, we acknowledge, and we move on. We don't hold it against ourselves, that we own all these different parts to ourselves and express it however we want to, in ways obviously that don't hurt anybody. That's when we embrace our power, and that's when we do manifest better, and we can have, you know, we will draw more positive things into our lives that are in alignment with our values. And in terms of what George was saying about militant vegans, I think, and George, Gwenna, and I have had this discussion before, that there is no one way to go about creating change or conveying messages of compassion. Mm-hmm. That if any one of us had that answer, we'd all be doing it, and there would no longer be any of these issues. We'd live in a more kind and compassionate world. But Gandhi, for example, he meditated many hours a day and was all about lots of love and light, but he was also in there in the streets marching and speaking out and getting arrested and all of that. He was taking action and he was meditating. I think that's highly effective. He did create, brought Indian independence, and he is one of the most important figures, I think, in the world. But he hasn't solved all the issues. He hasn't solved all the problems, so he didn't even have all the answers. None of us knows. There may be some vegans who come across as a little more strident and harsh, and they're speaking from their passion. They may alienate some. They may get through to others. They're the more loving peace. You know, I'm just going to sit here and be happy and to myself and never say anything harsh or negative to others. That's going to work for some. It's not going to work for others. Images, everything, wearing your animal safe or vegan power shirt and the Laura Wellness design. These can influence people. It just takes everything and everyone's energy together, working together to be able to do that. So there is no, this is bad, this is good. It's all of these different worlds and dimensions and shades of gray.
I like that. Oh, go ahead, George.
I really just wanted to add the disclaimer: the Lamborghini is definitely not eco. I know she meant that in, just kind of.
Thanks, Mr. Literal.
Fun.
So, Mr. Literal.
It's a sensitive spot for me with eco cars.
I wanted to add to both what Jonathan and Vanessa were saying. I was thinking when Jonathan was bringing up fashion, I started to instantly think about Gothic fashion, and how I don't think it's the exact same anymore, but back in like the 80s and 90s, it was kind of a way where people were expressing their darkness by how they dressed. And not necessarily anymore, but I thought that was, and I really like Gothic fashion, like punk Gothic fashion. I think it's really beautiful, and a beautiful expression of just being different from the norm. But I wanted to also expand on something Vanessa said about being told not to cry. In the community where I grew up, which was, mostly all African American, that's how we were raised. Even myself, it's like, don't cry, or you could be getting punished, physically punished, and it's like, don't you dare cry, which makes absolute no sense. It's really a very cruel, but I understand they were just repeating probably what was done to them. But when you tell a child not to cry, they grow up with this. Like, it's hard for them to release tears because they look at it as a form of weakness, or as something that is, you know, something to be embarrassed about. And you think about, if you're growing up in a really impoverished environment, and it's a stressful environment, and there's crime, and your whole life you've been holding in tears, and you've been told not to cry, how in the heck do you think that's definitely going to manifest itself through violence? There's, you know, or I mean, not every single time, but most of the time it is going to manifest itself in resentment and in violence and in physical ailments. Think about, you're supposed to release that water from your face, from your eyes. I call them healing waters. You're supposed to release that. And if you don't get to release that, and that stays inside the body, just imagine all the different things that manifest from that. And I had to look it up. And I remember during my Bible thumping days, there was a scripture that I remember reading, and it blew my mind. And I'm like, how come no one ever talks about this in the religious community? And there's a verse that's in Isaiah 45:7, where this is God speaking. And he says, in the New International Version, I form the light and create the darkness. I bring prosperity and create disaster. I, the Lord, do all these things. So God to me, what I'm interpreting from that is that he's admitting that he is the light and he's the darkness. I've always thought that God was God and the devil all in one, because if everything came from one source and one energy, how could it not be? So spoke my piece on that.
And Gwenna, what if you are the light and the darkness? You are the God.
I actually believe that, but I wasn't going to go there. Absolutely.
It's time we did. It's time we went all the way. What if there's no such thing as a God and only we exist and we're just different manifestations of a different dimension? Maybe we would see ourselves differently, treat ourselves differently.
I believe that.
And if we treat ourselves differently,
I definitely believe that.
Then
I definitely believe that. I had an experience through plant medicine. It was my first experience on this journey, and I set the intention that I wanted to like leave Earth. I wanted to go into the universe, and I did. And I'm flying past all the stars, and then I come up to this stop, and I see what looks like connected dots, like what you do in your coloring book. It looks like connected dots, but the outline looks like a woman's body. And before I could even complete the thought, I was on the inside of it. And all I saw was like a lot of geometry and code and numbers, and the numbers were alive and talking to me and going through me. And then I was on the outside of it, and I had a full download understanding, because I saw all these gold beams of light, like more than you could count, going in and out of the body. And I understood that those gold beams of light were us, and that we were part of the whole. But we were here manifesting ourselves in different versions. We could be a human, we could be a rock, we could be a piece of dirt, we could be a monster, we could be paint, we could be a planet, you could be anything that you wanted. And you would always come back to the whole to create the entire being. And the way I understood it was like a glass of water. So if you have a whole glass of water and you take the droplets and you just splash them everywhere, you know, at some point they're going to end up all over the place, and they may forget that they're part of this whole glass of water. But at some point, the droplets come back to the glass and become one whole glass of water again, if that made any sense.
Yes, of course it does. And at the Chopra Center, we use the analogy of the ocean.
Yes.
Comes onto the beach as waves, And the waves look like they're separate from the ocean when they come onto the beach. And then they return back into the mighty ocean, become even bigger and stronger and more powerful when they reunite with the rest of the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all dependent on the ocean for our lives, all of us, every single one of us. And yet we choose to only use it when we want to go to the beach. We want to have pleasure for ourselves, but we don't choose to take care of it, to caress it, to hold it in its most revered position. But we just want to use things if they're useful for us that we can see with our limited perception, then we think there's value. If we don't see there's no value, what if each of us has tremendous value and we're not aware of it? How would we act differently if we knew it? What belief systems would we carry within us? Because everything that we do on the outside is completely and totally determined by how we feel about ourselves on the inside. Yes, Vanessa.
I was just thinking of that Marianne Williamson, is that her name, quote? I can't remember, where she says, you know, when we put ourselves down, who are you not to see what's amazing and beautiful and wonderful about you? That we all are perfect as we are.
That is not a Marianne Williamson quote. No, that was actually quoted by Mandela. It was a Mandela quote that she used. It was Nelson Mandela.
I thought it was the reverse. I thought that because I had read that she was the one who said it and he used her quote when
I did take the Course in Miracles, and the Course in Miracles does have something very similar to that, but she quoted him. But go ahead.
Okay. Well, so anyway, the quote is just about how perfect and amazing we all are, and that there is, you know, who are we to be putting ourselves down and to say that we're not created in this amazing way, whether there's some outside force or not that is intentional. We all are part of creation and life, and every single being is important, and every single one is beautiful and perfect and matters. And I always think that if I'm working on a project or I have an idea and I think, gosh, I have all these great ideas and I want to do my vision, if I invite other people in, it's like it exponentially multiplies. Having all those different energies and those different brains there, the creativity is just so much more. And one person may something which will then trigger a totally new thought in somebody else, which may trigger something in somebody else. And it's so much bigger than one person by him or her or their self. So it's just something that I think that human and non-human being creativity is something that is so powerful and so amazing to witness. And that if we all embraced how perfect that was, then we would see that each and every other being matters just as much. We all matter just as much as each other, and one isn't more important or better than another. And I was also going to add that, Gwenna, what you were describing when you were in out of this world and flying, you've got to watch Dark, because there was this scene when they were just surrounded by all this, exactly the way you were describing it, all these like particles of light that they were going through when they were sort of in between worlds. I would love to get your reaction to that. I think you would absolutely love it. But I do think that the world is made up of all of us and all our energies, but there's also so much more out there that we don't yet know, and that does remain unknown. And we make up various stories about what it means due to our creativity. It's when we get caught in this is how it is and this is how it must be, that I think it becomes dangerous and rigid and we're divisions. And instead of seeing the connectedness, we see the differences becomes problematic.
I wanted to just comment on something Vanessa said and what Gwenna said as well. Vanessa was talking about being perfect. There's an affirmation that I use that says we are perfectly imperfect, and that really resonates with me quite a bit. And Gwenna was talking about if you're not crying, how it holds in within the body, not only from a psychological aspect, but also it releases toxins through your tears. So you truly are changing your, you know, your chemistry of your body and letting those things out.
Good to know.
Yeah, totally agree. And actually, I was thinking of this image that I love to think about when I'm in those darkest moments. And I think it's a nice image to share, to talk about embracing darkness and light. It's, if you think about, like, imagine you are in this room. It's totally dark. You cannot see nothing. And you stand up in this room and you're very hungry. You want to eat something. And you have nothing, and you can go out of this room and you will never know what could have happened in this dark room, or you can just have a little lighter, and with just this small light, it will light the entire room, and you will realize that there is a chair, there is a table, there's even food on this table, and so yeah, even in this darkness, a little light can bring up all the opportunity that this dark room can bring to you, instead of just leaving this room. So I don't know if that's people can, yeah.
Yes, we do definitely. At least I do understand. You came across really well. I think you described it well enough for at least me to understand. Thank you. So in the work of Debbie Ford, and even with Jung, I think most of us, the Swiss psychologist, he said our shadow is the person we would rather not be. Can the panelists please comment on that?
Yes, it's kind of true, but I feel like you need to embrace it. You need to know this darkness person to understand what you really want and what you don't want. And I think it's a part of you, and you need to accept it and embrace it. Embracing your darkness and your light.
Vanessa, anybody online who wants to?
Yes, I was just answering some people's comments here. Jory Denny says that there's a study that shows tears from different emotions have different properties. That's really interesting. I'd love to hear more about that, Jory, if you know any more, because that seems really fascinating. Sarah Siegel, thanks for watching, Sarah. We'll have to have you on as well. She says we have to help humans understand what speciesism means, for sure, that there is this divinity or connection between every single being, everyone. We are all connected. We need to manifest a vegan world. Yes, if we manifest well enough, all of us together, we will manifest a vegan world for sure. And Jory said at one point a few minutes ago, great point, Gwenna. I'm not sure what it is, but you made a great point, but I agree. And she was also saying that about my point of the Lamborghini, I was just being silly, not mentioning Tesla, so I didn't feel George's obsession anymore and get him off on that. She said she was wondering if Lamborghini started making electric cars. Not yet, but hopefully soon. So that, yeah. And I did post the poem, Our Deepest Fear by Marianne Williamson. I did post it. It is actually her poem, and it mistakenly has been attributed to Mandela, who didn't actually even say that in his speech. But what I was going to say is that when we reject any part of ourselves, and when we don't own any part of ourselves, that's when we create a certain kind of myopia about who we are. That's when, you know, when people say, oh, I'm a very communicative person, I really like discussing things, and then you notice that they don't at all, despite what they say, that whom they're projecting themselves to be is not matching your experience of them. To me, that's often because they're not owning different parts of themselves and not acknowledging them. And I think in therapy, you can't move forward effectively, and you can't get to where you want to go as fully if you're refusing to look at parts of yourself and saying those are bad, or I'm ashamed of them, I don't like them. That's when they fester inside you and have power over you. It's when you embrace them and acknowledge, without it being a self-abnegation, beating myself up or how terrible I am. It's just being honest about where you are right now so that you have more power and ability to shape where you're headed.
So yes, Marianne Williamson did say that in the Course of Miracles, because that is based on the Course of Miracles, but that was not her original quote. The original came from Nelson Mandela, and she used it in the Course of Miracles. And it's been attributed to her. It's the same thing like Obama said during his campaign, we are the ones we have been waiting for, but it's in a Native American language, and he never gave them any kind of credit for it, and it's now become known as him having that quote, but he simply repeated. We all do. We all repeat what others say, but just I believe we need to give credit for the source of it.
Yes, we do. And Joe Biden has actually been seen to many times say things that he thinks he came up with, apparently, but that he didn't. So I think it is very important that we hold people accountable and know that we all build on top of each other, that we should attribute, because it's just that richness of our all contributing to each other that we come up with new ideas, more brains will come up with new richness, but we're all inspired by what came before. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Jonathan?
Yeah, I totally agree. and we can feel it in everything, even in that make me think about music, but fashion, art. Everybody is inspiring by someone else, and they just make it in their own way. So yeah, that's why I would love to know the really first person who creates music, because this person inspires so many people after that.
What's the question?
Yeah, Dorit, what was the question? It was something about rejecting the dark parts of ourselves.
It was Jung. It was the quote by Jung, which is where he said, "Our shadow is the person we would rather not be."
Our shadow is the person we would rather not be.
Yes, but this is in his work on the shadow self, because that's what really fascinates me, the shadow self, which we all have to some degree or other until we merge them both. But and that's to me is the lifelong, the true work we come to do is to merge them both. So what does that quote say to you personally? Or would you like?
Well, I guess it says to me, I mean, that's kind of the battle I've been in, is trying not to be that, but then realizing that I was that, the thing that I was trying to hide and suppress and not be. I just realized, like, let me just be truthful. And, like what George said about the tears releasing toxins, and what Vanessa read in the chat is so true, because I'm allowing myself like to cry whenever I feel it. So if I feel like it, I'm just letting it out, and I'm able to like get through it and then move on to the next. Whereas before, I wasn't able to do that. So that was a part of what not that that's a dark part of yourself, but it's a part of myself that I looked at as being dark, is, allowing emotions and sadness and things like that to flow through. And, I'm still, obviously, because I'm still on this planet, I'm still, dealing with other dark parts of my emotion. I remember one time, this is when I lived in Charlotte, and there was someone I was kind of like in business with, and they really pissed me off. He really pissed me off. And I had been like suppressing and holding stuff in. And one day I unleashed and I cursed him out from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. And afterwards, I remember I felt so exhilarated. I felt so good and so amazing. I felt like I could have ran 100 miles without stopping. And that said a lot to me. I'm like, wow, like I got it out. I cursed him out, and it was not a nice cursing. It was a good one. And it did something to my body. Like I literally was energized. Like I had just drank coffee, and and I felt like euphoric. And like I said, I felt like I could have just ran a marathon without stopping or looking back. So it started, even though I still had an issue with expressing myself, but that day it let me know there was something very good and healthy about, purging your anger and your rage, and that obviously it was unhealthy to keep it in and to suppress it.
Is there anyone online who would like to make about this, Vanessa? Yes, George.
Still on mute. So I was just thinking more about that question, and you know, not even like the positive, negative kind of light and dark, but in the sense of how can we really be aware and adapt our behavior of our conscious mind when we're not aware of what is happening in our unconscious mind, and we further are removed from that. I know that kind of goes along with what Vanessa said as well. And one of the things I thought about from both Vanessa and from Jonathan was how much that we observe things in other people that we don't want to be like. And I look at that as kind of darkness as well, not in a judgmental way, but I look at leadership and you know, people I've had in leadership over me in the past, and I've learned more from seeing the things that I don't feel are really nurturing or helpful than I have by having great mentors in life.
Vanessa, anything online?
No, nothing. No new comments online. We've had great comments so far, but Jory just said she tried to find it. I may have gotten that wrong, but emotional tears do contain stress hormones that are released. Yes, while tears from eye irritants do not. Interesting. I do want to kind of do some Googling on that because you've gotten me curious, Jory. I do think that there is we know scientifically there is such that emotional release and that catharsis that come from crying. And so that is such a mistake to tell people not to. But just to continue with that person that we don't want to be, I think that's because of judgment of feelings. And again, it's the feelings versus actions. I think I believe in never judging my feelings, no matter how bad they are, how destructive, how mean-spirited, how whatever. I let myself feel it because I can move through it more quickly the more I fully embrace it. When I'm really angry about something really bad has happened, I fully go into that as much as possible and let myself feel it fully, get it all out, and then I feel much more peaceful. Like Gwenna said, that huge release, you may not have loved how you did it, but it was telling you that storing those things is so toxic for yourself. And when you let it out, it's so much healthier. So I let myself go through that. Don't suppress it. I work through it. I don't judge it and say that's not who I want to be because I'm going through it. And then once it's out, then I pick, who do I want to be? How do I want to respond? What feels good to me as a human and how I want to be in this world? That's who I'm going to be. So for me, that shadow part is only whom I don't want to be if I'm judging those things. And if I don't judge them and I embrace them and then work through them, I don't need to be that if I don't choose to. I can have a response that's a more loving and accepting, boundary-filled kind of response. The other thing is, I think that to me, the work of therapy is merging the unconscious with the conscious, letting those dreams in, being aware of them. And that once we merge those two, and we have that clear pathway of what is our body and the rest of ourselves trying to tell us, then we can function much more freely and with choice rather than being acted upon.
So I find it interesting that we're talking about emotions and we only seem to dwell on one kind. But the truth of that, I cry most when I'm happiest or when I'm deeply touched. That love is released. I cry in the presence of love. So maybe we need to stop thinking certain emotions we need to suppress and only certain ones are acceptable. And maybe we just accept the full spectrum of all our emotions and use them to get to know ourselves on a deeper level. So we need to close because we only have 1 minute. So I'm going to go through and ask each person to just wrap up before we finish here. So I'm going to start with Jonathan, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, and embrace yourself and wear your value and be happy.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, Vanessa is next.
Yes, embrace all parts of yourself. Dorit, I couldn't say it better. You just said it so beautifully, that the more we embrace every aspect and don't judge anything coming in and allow the expression of all of it, tears of joy, whatever it is, rage, anger, any of the emotions and any combination, embrace it fully. And you will be much happier if you embrace it fully and allow yourself to be who you are without judgment and with acceptance.
Gwenna, you're the one who brought up this topic. We are discussing this today because you gave us. So would you like to close before we go to George?
Sure. So one of the things is every time I do plant medicine, I get the same message consistently, which is not to suppress my feelings and to feel it. I'm always being told, feel it. It's okay. And every time I do that, it's like a huge relief. So one thing I could just say to people, which we're all kind of repeating, is don't be afraid of yourself. That's one thing I did for years, is I was afraid of myself. Don't be afraid of your power, and don't be afraid of what you consider to be darkness, because sometimes that darkness is what leads you to the light. So I just say, like Vanessa said, embrace all of it and don't be afraid of yourself.
Well, if we feel it, then we don't need to express it.
That's right.
George?
Everyone else has pretty much summarized everything. I'll just add it to go onto that is just embracing that feeling, and that most of the time when we do fully embrace the feeling and don't have to have any action paired with it, that most of the time those feelings will dissipate in about 90 seconds. So it's, that slight discomfort that it might feel, it's over quickly. Thanks, everyone.
Only when we do not feel it does it continue.
Exactly.
We do not embrace it. When we do not embrace it, and then it takes over. It takes over. So thank you, Gwenna, for suggesting this topic today. I trust that we've reached enough people who would like to continue with this conversation. Please continue here in the comment section and come back again next week, same time, as we bring another panel together to discuss anything that you wish to discuss. So please let us know what you'd like to discuss next week as well. Until then, on behalf of everyone, thank you so much. And please be kind to your own feelings by really deep within them. Bye for now.